Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. We'll now chant Sambujo, followed by the reading of the Golden Chain 2, and then chanting of Junirai. Please join me in the reading of Golden Chain 2. I'm a link in the Buddha's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I must keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to say pure and beautiful words, and to do pure and beautiful deeds, knowing that on what I do now depends not only my happiness or unhappiness, but also that of others. May every link in the Buddha's golden chain of love become bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandav, 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 Namandav. We're not yet Junirai. 不主任死心教悲尊法が将来未来尊悲尊無料法勉強無償修悪知識往生不体死亡大法が将来未来尊仮説非尊苦毒寺修善無変妙海水生薬前言症状者摂取上消費行ナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウがんにしくどく平等正祭道本菩提心往生安楽ナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウナマンダウGood morning, or afternoon, or whatever the case may be if you're watching the recording later. I'm happy to be back, and it's September, so it's the start of fall for us at the Buddhist Temple of Marin. I'd like to start the next portion of our service by sharing my Dharma message. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the slideshow I've prepared. Okay. If you please join me in Kansho, I'd like to share some words from our founder, Shinran Shonin. Deep self is the deeply entrusting self. There are two aspects. One is to believe deeply and decidedly that we are limited beings, entrenched in our collective karma, caught in birth and death, ever sinking and ever wandering in transmigration from innumerable kalpas in the past, and never a condition that would lead to emancipation. The second is to believe deeply and decidedly that Amida Buddha's 48 vows grasp sentient beings, and that allowing ourselves to be carried by the power of the vow without any doubt or apprehension we will be emancipated from the world of suffering through birth in the land of bliss. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandav, 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 Namandav. This passage that I just shared comes from our founder Shinran Shonin's magnum opus, the Kyogyo Shinsho, in chapter 3 on Shinjin, which is commonly translated as faith. This lengthy chapter and Shinran's explanations are rooted in many Buddhist scriptures and in the commentaries of many Buddhist masters. And this chapter is fundamental to the unique religious perspectives that our tradition of Jodo Shinshu have on how we can orient ourselves in the world. The particular passage that I shared is on the deep self, which is Shinran's quote from Chinese Pure Land Master Shan Dao in his commentary on the Contemplation Sutra. I've been thinking a lot about how people, especially in the United States, view religion and religious teachings. Here in our temple, we are in a unique context, a community that's diverse and shares a lot of perspectives on how we view ourselves and the world around us. For our Sangha, our religious lives are likely ingrained into our everyday lives. Some of us say Namo Amida Butsu and Itadakimasu before we have a meal, not as a religious practice necessarily, but as just how we live. From an outsider's perspective, however, this might look like a prayer before our meal. But that's a Western Christian idea, thanking God, the Creator, for the food that we have. However, for many of us as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, it's just what we do. We don't even think about it. However, we express our gratitude for the sacrifice of life and the efforts of others that have brought us the meal that we have. There might be other things that we do that might feel a bit more quote-unquote religious. Perhaps like chanting at our home altar, or coming to service on Sunday, or other events that are sponsored by the temple or the Buddhist churches of America. And yet, at the same time, are they really religious activities, or are they just a part of our everyday lives? I think sometimes we emphasize separating those two categories, but in reality for us Buddhists, those things go together hand in hand. It's just what we do as a part of our normal life, and this is a part of the nature of our awakening heart. For my Dharma talk today, I want to recontextualize our awakening heart, our lives of faith that are contained within our everyday lives as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. Faith is an adequate word to describe Shinjin, but it's not perfect. Just like saying the phrase giving thanks might be an adequate way to describe Itadakimasu. It's not perfect, but it allows us to communicate and understand our traditions a little bit better with ourselves and others. Similarly, language can hinder or help us when we study our tradition. The term deep self is a very contextual modification that I made from the collected works of Shinran's translation of the Buddhist term Jinshin, which in the collected works is translated as deep mind. You can see the Chinese characters on the slide that I have on the right side of the slide. I made this change in the translation because I think that it's pretty common for us in the Western world to separate the idea of our mind and our heart. The mind is very calculating, it's logical and thinking, it's strategic. But our hearts are emotional, they have feelings, and they're easily swayed. Oftentimes, in the Western context, Buddhism is presented as logical, intellectual, and philosophical rather than lived and feeling religion. But honestly, that's a Western colonialist and rationalist mindset imposed on living Buddhists, especially Asian Buddhists and their immigrant ancestors around the world. As Buddhists, it's really important for us to challenge those binaries of the emotional heart versus the logical mind, of cultural values versus authentic Buddhism, because our lives as lived Buddhists are both of those things. Hopefully we're guided by both logic and reasoning, and also by feeling an emotion, which is, I think, what Shinran is trying to convey in this passage on Jinshin. The first character, read alone, in contemporary Japanese is fuka, or the adjective fukai, which means deep. When the two characters of Jinshin are put together, they mean a specific Buddhist term, but when we read them in contemporary Japanese as a phrase, they can be read as fukai kokoro, which literally means deep heart. However, going back to Buddhist history in China, the character for heart, kokoro or shin, means a lot more than an emotional aspect of our being or our blood-pumping physical organ. This character and the concept of shin is an intersection of all the bits of who we are, our mind, our emotions, the influence or karma of our families, our communities, our loved ones, our friends, and even our enemies, and how we view the world. It's virtually the entirety of ourself as it relates to everything in the world. There's an entire cosmology of the universe bundled up in this one concept within the character of Shin or Kokoro. So now that Shin, or self, needs to be made deep. Part of our hope as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists is this perspective of Jinshin, of a deep understanding of the self. That isn't just me and myself alone, but it includes everyone in the world, all living beings, sentient or not. This is where we come back to the passage I shared for our Gosandai. And here I'd like to share my own interpretation or exegesis of what Shinran is trying to convey about faith in this passage. So here I have a simple side-by-side of the two aspects of deep mind from the Gosandai in the original translation from the collected works of Shinran. So the tone is a little different from the one I read at the beginning. Let's look at them together, and then on the next slide we'll examine my own exegesis of the passage as it relates to our lived experience as Buddhists. The two aspects of deep mind, or Jinshin. One is to believe deeply and decidedly that you are a foolish being of karmic evil, caught in birth and death, ever sinking and ever wandering in transmigration from innumerable kalpas in the past, with never a condition that would lead to emancipation. Second is to believe deeply and decidedly that Amida's Buddha's 48 vows grasp sentient beings, allowing you to be carried by the power of the vow. Without any doubt or apprehension, you will attain birth. In the original context, the author indicates that faith, or deep mind, is imparted upon us by Buddha, and it realizes the self to be foolish, stuck in a cycle of karmic evil, unable to liberate ourselves from the transmigration that goes back for many kalpas, or immeasurably long time. I see this as our limited nature due to our own reliance on personal experience or karma to understand ourselves and the worlds in which we're living. We tend to think of ourselves first, even when we try to relate to other people and their suffering. We understand it through our own limited means. This leads us to make mistakes, which often causes harm for ourselves and for others. The other side of this realization is our entrustment in the Buddha, that Buddha will sustain us and carry us through life and bring us to birth in the Pure Land. And based on my own experience in ministry, both in my studies and talking to folks in the Sangha, this part of entrusting can sometimes be the most confounding and feel quite abstract to people. That's the difficult part of maintaining our own spiritual care. Oftentimes, we want a guidebook with rules and policies to follow. What's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. That structure might give some clarity for some people, but honestly, it's too rigid to fit everyone's lives. Because of life's messiness, I think a good place to start when thinking about our spiritual health is that acknowledgement of our helplessness, or in the very least, our limitedness. Because of that lack of understanding, we have to rely on other power to survive. Like when we say itadakimasu to express our gratitude for the sacrifices of life and hard work to feed us. We rely on the support, love, and understanding and teaching of others in our lives. This is the activity of Buddha in our lives, or other power. Tariki, or other power, is the power of others, which is also the power of Buddha and the activity of enlightenment in our lives. Here's the explanation that I have of the two aspects of deep self, based on the collected works of Shinran translation that I just shared with you. The first is that our perceptions, our realities, our truths are biased. Everything that we hold as true and real is only a partial understanding of reality, which means that our perspectives are usually centered on ourselves. We're not perfect, nor are we 100% right. We make mistakes every day. All of these things make us human. None of us is perfect, and that's why we suffer, and hopefully we learn together. The second aspect is, because of our imperfections, we need love, support, and viewpoints of others. We must find forgiveness, love, and acceptance for ourselves and for others, because we're all interconnected. The perspectives and wisdom of others can help us to grow and learn, and in turn, be more kind to ourselves and to others. This shared compassion will result in our collective liberation from suffering. Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is a subversive way of living within a hyper-individualistic, self-help-oriented, work hard and play hard, capitalist dominant structure that's steeped in the very fabric of Western cosmology. Most of us are convinced from a young age that if we sacrifice our youth, our health, our well-being, our relationships, and our peace of mind, then we can achieve great things. We're told that our value as humans is based on our quote-unquote contribution to society, which is almost always monetized as labor. However, going against this stream of thought are our Buddhist communal values, that we must rely on others to become more whole, that we're all interconnected, and that we carry the karma of our ancestors, our communities, and those we despise. Coming to grips with these conflicting worldviews and holding them at once is a crucial part of realizing Jinshin, or the deep self. We're limited by our subjectivity and self-centered narrative of truth, and that means that we must rely on the guidance, effort, and help of others. We need love and support and compassion. Just like our identities have components that can't be separated from one another, and we can't delineate our religious lives from our everyday lives, these two aspects of a deeper understanding of ourselves are essential to one another. Additionally, pursuing these two aspects of understanding ourselves more deeply can provide insight into how we might be more compassionate to ourselves and to others. The humility of seeing ourselves as imperfect and biased will allow us to be more closely listen to the suffering of others and our own needs, which generally and naturally will lead to a more informed attempt at alleviating injustice, inequity, and violence in the world. In a sense, this is the practice of awakening our hearts to a world full of pain, much like the practices of Bodhisattva Dharmakara, who is constantly in a state of becoming Amida Buddha within our own hearts. I'd like to close today's Dharma message with the passage I shared at the start, so please join me in Kansho. Deep self is the deeply entrusting self. There are two aspects. One is to believe deeply and decidedly that we are limited beings, entrenched in our collective karma, caught in birth and death, ever sinking and ever wandering in transmigration from innumerable kalpas in the past, and never a condition that would lead to emancipation. The second is to believe deeply and decidedly that Amida Buddha's 48 vows grasp sentient beings, and that allowing ourselves to be carried by the power of the vow without any doubt or apprehension, we will be emancipated from this world of suffering through birth in the land of bliss. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandav, 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 Namandav. I'd like to conclude our service for today. If you're here live, feel free to hang around and we'll talk for a little bit after I stop the recording. And if you're joining us on YouTube, then please take care and be well. I'd like to thank the Buddhist Temple of Marin for your continued support and help, and for the opportunity to be able to serve you. Thanks.